Honestly, now when I know that there was a season of Mastery, it's expected that season of Discovery is that Boom, classic World of Warcraft in 2025, should you play it? I have watched a video of this guy in the past and I really liked it. And I'm just curious what he has to say, really. He always has this intro. But Classic has a lot of versions now, so...
Hey guys,
this is his music.
Here, back with another video for you. There are 3 guarantees in life: death, taxes, and classic World of Warcraft. It is a version of the game that through...
There are always the classic Andes who are crying that there are not enough classic servers, but at the same time the classic servers are empty. But maybe this guy will tell me something that I don't know.
Official means or otherwise, has been running for decades, and always will to some degree. But the real question is, where to begin? Even the launcher is confusing at this point. You have World of Warcraft, World of Warcraft Classic.
I don't have that many versions. See, I have World of Warcraft Classic and Cataclysm Classic. I don't have Anniversary Realms, I don't have Hardcore. How do you see all these versions of the game? I'll launch into... I don't have that button though. I don't have that button. Maybe if I download World of Warcraft Classic, I'm gonna have that button. But right now, I was wondering, because if you look right here in my launcher, I have a Cataclysm and World of Warcraft Classic, but I don't have that launch into button. Anyway.
Cataclysm, Classic Era, Season of Discovery, Hardcore, Anniversary. It's kind of extra. A common question that I get on the channel is, where do I begin? So I thought that it was worth making a State of World of Warcraft in 2025 video and talk about all of these different versions of...
I kind of wanted to see that video because I wanted to come back to WoW for the longest time, and I wanted to see someone who is a veteran what he's gonna say about the current state of the game, right?
The game and how many people are playing them, so I can hopefully steer you down a path that's right for you, if there is any at all. Or maybe if you're just an onlooker curious on what's going on within the world of Azeroth. Before I get into the different versions though, I want to do a very short historical recap because I think it's important in understanding why things are the way they are today. And note that before we begin here, all of these versions are accessible with just the subscription fee.
Yeah.
So is that worth it? I'm not sure about that, but I do know it is. Trimming your balls and beard with...
Okay, I don't want to do that now.
Except instead of virtual weapons, they're blade heads.
Okay, enough about this, okay?
Style. Is this
I
bad
understand.
boy features? And this is the gear plus free internet.
I'm happy for your Manscaped
which was
ad,
released
but...
in 2004 and ended in 2007 officially, but it's been running the whole time thanks to private servers, Nostalrius being the most popular. A little too popular, I guess, because they eventually caught the attention of Blizzard and were shut down in 2016, leaving many who enjoyed vanilla without a home. This sparked a lot of outrage, as you would imagine, and eventually, after years and years of no, in 2019, Blizzard caved and released World of Warcraft Classic. This was a recreation of the original vanilla version of the game, for the most part. There ended up being some changes, such as the Chrono Boon, which allowed you to store world buffs. And it ran fairly successfully, drip-feeding players the content in phases, which very roughly mimicked the original's cadence of patches during their original releases. And in 2021, as expected, they moved on to the next expansion, the Burning Crusade, and at the same time...
And I said that multiple times, I'm extremely sad that I have missed TBC phase.
This was when Classic Era was born. Everyone would be defaulted into the Burning Crusade, like how they were in 2007, but this time they were also given an option to also copy their characters to a permanent Classic server called Era, and these are still running today. These are vanilla servers in the game's final patch, 1.12. The final raid tier is Nexramus, and they hold all of the raids, dungeons, and battlegrounds, and all the systems that were in their final state of vanilla. And although at launch the servers were completely dead, it did find a pretty niche player base over time as the 2019 line started moving further and further away from vanilla. Though as far as vanilla is concerned, if you're looking for something fresh, you're better off with the Anniversary Realms, which we'll talk about later. So, as mentioned, Burning Crusade Classic released in 2021. controversially with our first microtransaction, the $50 level boost. Wait, can you really call it micro if it costs as much as an expansion? So this was met with controversy, as Blizzard at that point had explicitly stated that they wouldn't release microtransactions in Classic, as they didn't exist in the original release. Regardless, it released and pressed on, and eventually rolled into Wrath in 2022, along with the WoW token. Told you so, by the way. And then finally,
I have nothing against the WoW token. I don't understand why people are crying about it.
Cataclysm Classic in 2024, where it stands today. So Cataclysm, you may know, was a huge expansion in terms of changes. So much so that it's where many people say that it's where Classic truly ended. So there's a bit of irony in its re-release. But people have been enjoying it nonetheless. But just to name a few of these changes, we have a completely reworked Azeroth, new quests across the board, revamped dungeons, revamped talent trees and spell system, and also the removal and streamlining of many RPG elements. There is also transmogrification and the looking for raid mode. It pretty much marked the beginning of a new era for World of Warcraft. And aside from that, it has some new stuff going on, such as a new dungeon difficulty called Protocol Infernal, which are a step up from Heroics, and they also award a currency that can be spent to obtain the previous raid tier's gear. At this point, it's nearing its finish. The final raid tier, Dragon Soul, just released on the 18th of February, so it's seen a surge of activity due to that, but much like the previous expansions, things are expected to settle down in the coming weeks. That is, at least until Mist Classic releases in spring or summer of this year. Something I think is important to note is that in this vein of Classic, combined with the aforementioned WoW token, it's currently the home base of GDKP runs. These are runs where raiders bid on gold on gear drops, and at the end, they all split the pot. So, as you can now purchase gold by official means, there's a very heavy RMT culture that's been born, and it's especially true because these GDKP runs have been policed on other versions of the game, so as a result, this is where they kind of thrive. Some people don't care about any of this, and that's fine, but I thought it was just worth mentioning since I know it is a big turnoff for many players. And another thing worth mentioning, I think, is that although Vanilla got era servers on the release of the Burning Crusade, none of these expansions as of yet have gotten the same treatment. There's no Burning Crusade era, Wrath era. Most likely there won't be a Cataclysm era when Mists releases. The reason for that, as far as I know, is that they fear it would split the player base too much, as there's already like a million different versions of Classic. But if you did miss out on that BC or Wrath experience, it's not all lost. So stay tuned because I'll talk about that later. But next we have Seasons. Seasons so far have been relaunches of vanilla versions of the game with alternate rule sets. The first was called the Season of Mastery, which launched in November of 2021, lasting for about a year, and it had changes such as an increased cadence on leveling through experience buffs, as well as alterations to raid bosses, generally making them harder. Since the player base has gotten so much better since the original 2004 launch, the endgame ended up being really easy, so the focus on this season was to increase the difficulty to reintroduce a challenge. But that's pretty much all old news. The newest and current season is the Season of Discovery, which launched in November of 2023 and is running.
Honestly, now when I know that there was a Season of Mastery, it's expected that Season of Discovery is that you know? Because I thought that Season of Discovery is something completely new that Blizzard never attempted to try. And it turns out that this is just another season, so it's basically if I knew back in the day that there is another season, I would have expected Season of Discovery to be but I didn't know. So that's why I hated Season of Discovery that much, because it could have been so much better. It could have been basically the official Ascension, you know?
As of this video, similar to Mastery, it holds experience and even gold boosts to speed players along the leveling process. It's a much more endgame focused version of Vanilla, and one of the most major features is the rune system, where every class can get a selection of runes to apply to their armor to give them new abilities or passives to fill out their toolkit. In general, all of the classes and specs are brought much closer together, and pretty much everything is viable, and all of the rotations have been made to be more complex and interesting. So gone are the days of the Frostbolt rotation for mages, or boomkins being barred entry to raids because they run out of mana in like 10 seconds. Every single spec has been rebalanced, and some even got new roles such as the Warlock, who can now tank. And something to add here is that there ended up being so many runes that many players found it to be too daunting to go through the many time-consuming ways of getting them. So Blizzard added an NPC in the starting area that sells every rune for every class for just 1 copper, so that's definitely worth considering if that was a roadblock for you. And there's also new content in other places, such as revamped loot, new profession recipes, new PvP areas.
That's so funny. That's so funny.
Or activities, or even the new dungeon, the Curzan Crypts, and also stuff like moderation, such as the banning of GDKP runs, as mentioned earlier. There are so many changes that some have referred to it as Classic Plus, whereas others who believe that these changes are not in line with the spirit of Classic refer to it as Retail Minus. People are really split on Season of Discovery, but it's definitely different, that's for sure. I'm currently not playing it these days. I ended up quitting at Phase 3, which was a very poorly received phase of the game, but I did enjoy myself for the amount of time I did play it. To reflect that, activity within the season has been pretty volatile. It started off very popular on its release, but it kind of lost momentum, especially in Phase 3. But since then, it's kind of picked up steam since players have hit the end game. As it stands right now, it's currently in the next Ramus phase, so there's this looming question if things are just gonna end, and what'll happen to everyone's characters if and when that happens. They've kind of alluded to keeping characters around, but there's nothing concrete yet. There's been some data mining alluding to a Scarlet Crusade raid after next Ramus, but again, nothing official has been released and it's up in the air right now, which if I'm...
I can't believe that there is nothing that was mentioned about Season of Discovery since the last time I heard something, which was probably November. And people are just playing.
I may interject my opinion here, I think is kind of stupid, because I feel like if they were to actually release some information on what their plans are, people might actually be interested in playing it. Like, as for myself, I don't want to start it up again if things are just going to end in 1 month. But if it turns out that they're doing more raid tiers after next Ramus, and it's going to be something that maybe goes on for another year or so, then yeah, I'll probably pick it up. But they've just been so closed off with what they're going to do, so a lot of people, including myself, are just kind of waiting in limbo. If none of those catch your interest, there's always Vanilla, which finally brings us to Anniversary. Not to make you feel old or anything, but in November of last year, World of Warcraft celebrated its 20th birthday, and while the War Within players got to enjoy commemoration in the form of a new $90 microtransaction, Classic Vanilla got a relaunch. So this is Vanilla with some alterations, the most major being dual specialization. As you probably know, you can buy the ability to switch between 2 different specs, which has been nicely received by those who enjoy both PvE and PvP activities. Speaking of PvP, the honor system is nerfed into the Weenie Hut Junior version, where there's no more decay, and ranks just need a certain amount of set honor to obtain. What was wrong with PvPing for 12 hours a day, every day for 3 months? People are so casual these days. And similarly to Discovery, GDKP runs are also banned on these servers currently. As of this video, the current raid tier is the Molten Core, so things are still pretty fresh. The next phase, Phase 3, is set to release in spring, and it unlocks the second raid tier, the Blackwing Lair. And like I mentioned earlier, if you missed out on the Burning Crusade or Wrath, you are in luck, because it was also confirmed that these Anniversary realms will eventually go through at least the Burning Crusade.
We're gonna play there.
If it does that, I expect Wrath as well, much
We're
like the
definitely
2019
playing
one, so
that.
I think it's pretty safe to say it'll just follow a similar path. As of right now, the rough estimate for Burning Crusade is winter of this year or the spring of next. And also with these Anniversary servers is Hardcore Anniversary, which we haven't talked about. So this started as a community project during the original 2019 run through the use of an add-on, and it was popular enough that Blizzard eventually made their own dedicated hardcore servers. The premise is pretty simple. You die once, you start over with no reses whatsoever. Servers for this mode were originally released in August of 2023 to pretty good success, But like with any other version, things slowly dropped off until the 20th anniversary, where they were re-released along with vanilla, so that's seen a surge of activity as well, and it's particularly popular on social media via streams. And there's also this monotone douchebag who's doing a challenge run where he doesn't spend any in-game money because he is a nerd with no life. But hardcore or not, Anniversary is the most fresh out of anything classic at the moment. People are still leveling, the world feels alive, and the finish line is pretty far off in the distance. But that's about it. If you're looking for personal suggestions, honestly it's really hard to answer since they're all so different. If you want classic WoW with elements of current, such as increased leveling speed and more gold income, and revamped class balance system,
I don't know. I want to try classic hardcore, but it's not gonna be now. Anyway,